What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Book of Proverbs series that we're doing here on nystv.org. And this is week 7. We've still got plenty more to go. And I have joining with me John Hall. He's here to help read the verses. And we're also just discussing things as men going through the Book of Proverbs. If this is your first one that you've watched, great. I mean, you can always go back through these. This is something that, I believe that I will be listening to pretty much weekly, just so that I can rehash all of these words of wisdom that we're understanding here, just so my children can listen, so other people, my family can listen to these things. So it's great for that. So wherever you're at on this, it doesn't matter if you're in week 1, week 7. It's not like a storybook to where it's telling a story. It is a chapter by chapter, wisdom by wisdom type thing. So don't feel like you got to go back and watch all 6 of them before you watch this one. This one's a great place to start as well. So we are getting started. John, how are you doing, man?
Well, it's good to be back and reading God's Word with the fellowship. It's good to be on the network. It's an honor to be here to talk about Proverbs and start this series. And I pray that God uses this in somebody's life, that they start reading it for themselves and applying it in their lives. That's what I'm excited about doing this Proverbs series. So without further ado, hey, I want to mention, I know I sent you a text yesterday, but the last 2 chapters, 6 and 5, we're talking about sexual immorality. And going back through it this week, God hammers it home even more. He's given even insights into evil's thoughts and how it traps us. So it's really cool that we're going over this. It's almost like a open book test. Last 2 chapters, sexual immorality and how to deal with it. But this one, he's giving you, it seems to me, more details on what the traps are.
Yeah. It's such a good guidebook, man. And so far, I've learned a lot just going back through it, because I've read Proverbs, I don't know how many times, John. I mean, I've read it so many times, but every time, and also discussing it with other people who take it seriously, there's always more to learn through all of this. So I'm interested in seeing it, man, because this applies to a lot of us. We might have been great at avoiding a lot of these traps thus far, but there's always another level of trap that is associated with this kind of thing. And this is just something that made sense. A lot of people have seen the movie The Matrix, and in The Matrix, it was written by a Christian lady, and she made it, and it's a lot of it is really interesting, the way it kind of lines up with the way we live and the world we live in. But this, if you remember, there's a scene, and I think I explained this even on the last one, but there's a lady in a red dress that he feels drawn to every time he goes into the Matrix. Like you'd see his eyes gaze as he passed through, or whatever. And so as you progress in life, new levels of temptation occur. Even in this type of scenario, new levels of temptation could occur the further you get down the path. And they're going to be better temptations that you can't just see right through. A good temptation is hard to see through, but this shows you those traps to avoid this. And that's, like you said, that's what we've talked about in the last couple chapters. And I'm grateful to be able to hear more of these traps, because we all need this. We all need this strength and like the ability to see through the tricks, because if you can't see through the tricks, man, it's very dangerous.
Well, he definitely stresses being vigilant, but what I liked about this chapter, and we're going to get into it, is he gives details of how evil thinks and what it does to ensnare us. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm like you. As long as we're breathing, we're susceptible to those traps if we're not vigilant and we're not walking in God's Word. So without further ado, let's bring this up. And I've cut it back, so if you want me to stop somewhere, John, because I've got it cut up into sections to where it makes sense for me. So I've got 1 through 4, and then we're going to take 5, and then we'll go through the rest.
No, I think you got it. You do a good job dividing it up, man. If I do stop, or if you feel the need to stop, let's do it. I mean, we're here to discuss it all, so let's take our time, go through it, and do it.
So the first 4 verses is for each and every person that's walking the face of the earth right now. It says, "My son, keep my words and lay up my commandments with thee. Keep my commandments and live, and my law as the apple of thine eye. bind them upon thy fingers, write them upon the tablet of thine heart. And it says, say unto wisdom, thou art my sister, and call understanding thy kinswoman. Right there, he's laying down the foundation for every believer. Look, this is how we operate.
And it makes it really clear how important it should be to us, to be able to call it our sister, our kinswoman. That's, these are people that we love, our family, to call it like our family, to love it that much that that's who it is. And like the word, like for kinswoman or kinsman, it's kinswoman or kinsman. It can be used, I guess, in both the definitions for both the words moda. And so it could be like an intimate friend, not just talking about your kin. I know we've heard it in kin, but it could be a really close friend, like even your spouse, as close as kind of friend you can have. And that's how important that this should be to us. And if it's not that important, if we're just so inclined towards our flesh, we need to really check ourselves and see, are we more inclined to wisdom, or are we more inclined to being what we want to be? Or do we have that stern pride about us that we can't break? I am who I am type mentality, or do we want to run in wisdom's direction? That's the way I see it. What about you, John?
Well, it is the foundational instruction for all of us following Jesus Christ. You're absolutely right to navigate this world. And this part, you mentioned something a second ago. In this aspect of my life, being in my mid-50s, I see things different. I hear things different. I experience things different than I did in my 40s, 30s. And you're absolutely right. And each and every step that we take to grow or decline is just a matter of, are we listening to Him? And are we navigating by Him? Because if we're declining and we're being susceptible to these traps, what I'm reading here is there is no other way to navigate these kind of traps unless you are walking with your kinswoman and that you love her. And we're told in Scripture, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're to place Jesus Christ above everything else in our lives. And if He's not forefront in our hearts, from what it says here, we're not going to be able to withstand these arrows from the devil, especially when it comes to the flesh. I agree with you.
If you're not taking wisdom as your kinswoman, like, and also it even says wisdom to keep the commandments and the law and keep it as the apple of your eye. And the apple of your eye, this is like your body is designed to kind of keep your eyes safe. You got eyelids that close your eyes. You naturally, when someone goes to strike you or whatever, you're turning your eyes away from that. So yeah, it's very important.
So we'll start there. I think everybody watching right now knows exactly what we're talking about. The foundational instructions for us is God's law, what He asks us to do and how He wants to be worshiped. The fifth one, it gets us into it, that they may keep thee from the strange woman. And here is that sexual immorality. From the stranger with flattereth with her words. So the first 4 verses tells us this is for me, it's the only way to stay away from it.
Yeah.
And it could mean any sexual immorality. When you go into Corinthians and Romans and you hear Paul talking, he names all kinds. And here, I don't know, do you see this as just the strange woman or sexual immorality, period?
Well, I see it as that. I see it as the strange woman, but I also see it in the context of the first few verses where we're calling wisdom our kinswoman or our kinsman, our sister, right? We're calling wisdom that, whereas we have the strange woman who flatters with her words and all of these different things. So it's also applied to almost not just sexual immorality, but the opposite of wisdom. The strange woman's the opposite of the woman wisdom, right? And a lot of people apply the Holy Spirit as wisdom. And so that's why they give the Holy Spirit the feminine aspect, but it doesn't ever say here this is the Holy Spirit. It's talking about wisdom. And there's never once you'll find in all of these verses where it mentions this, that it's saying wisdom is the Holy Spirit. However, it's interesting the way it applies that to wisdom, and then it applies a woman to the opposite of wisdom. And I just think there's probably a correlation there as well. So there's several levels here of understanding, because it applies it in a way you can understand it, because a woman, she flatters with her words. Like, this is a woman who is trying to seduce you, is going to flatter you in every way she can. She's going to tell you that, oh, you're so handsome, or how are you so powerful? How are you so this or that? Just whatever. I'm just saying, like, any kind of way that I'm obviously not very good at, as a woman trying to flatter somebody, but you know what I mean? Like, they're better at it than
That's
me,
a good thing.
But in your mind, you can imagine that scenario, because as men, we've all encountered the woman who is flatters with her lips and tries to seduce you. We can imagine that, and women can understand how that works as well. So the way it describes it is also very descriptive and a warning to watch out for women that flatter you constantly with their words. They're constantly flattering you, trying to make you feel, gas you up, I guess, if you will, the 2023 version of that, gassing you up. So I don't know, man. Oh, what do you think about that, John?
Well, I looked up this week, OnlyFans and these other sites that are easily accessible, looked at how many people are sewing into this stuff, and the numbers are astronomical. And you look at the 90s, and I went back and looked after reading this and going, okay, where are we at? Because we live in a very sexualized culture. And now with social media platforms and the temptations just coming in through whatever screen, and you have no control over it. You have somewhat, but no, God knows we are under attack. And man, He's given us concrete ways, and He's telling us the insight, just like you said, on how they flatter us and how they deceive us. And these numbers.
Exactly, dude.
It was astronomical.
No, sorry. I'm not trying to, I'm just cheering you on because you're getting it. That's awesome. Yes. So true.
It's unbelievable. We live it. I'm looking at on Instagram, and you guys can attest to this. You have to have your guard up when you turn Instagram on, because people are on Facebook today. On one of the stories, somebody had a naked woman up in my friends list, right? And I can't vet everybody, but there it was, like on Facebook, and it was right in your face. You can't unsee it. And the first thing, it's like you have to shut that down, block that person like quickly, because you never know when it comes to social media. You never know when you go to the end of town that has these places. You just don't go to them. And at the very beginning of this, the first 4 verses, he tells us outright, this is how you do it. And he's done that in the last 2 chapters.
Yeah, man. And like, I love how it just really, you can use that flattering with her words thing to, like you said, anything. I mean, you were talking about propaganda being forced down our throat. Things that are flattering to the ear are constant. It's constant things that, oh yeah, that would be okay. Let's do that. This. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of seduction, not just from women, but from sin in general, that the world tries to throw at us. I remember as a child, the seduction of the world was what drew me to it. I mean, let's be real about this. Let's be real. Like, it drew me to the world. It drew me. Everything about it looked so flashy. The flashy people that got to walk around having fun, driving any car they wanted, just living a life that looked like an amazing thing. Like, it looked so awesome to me when I saw it. I was just like, this is crazy, and I've grown up kind of poor my whole life, believing in God and doing all these different things. But these guys don't really believe in God, and they are living an amazing life, like it looks like, and so it was seductive. How can that not be seductive? And to think of it like the way they put it here, it makes so much sense. And so this is what our young are dealing with right now, a seductive woman, if you will.
Way worse than we had it, John.
Way worse.
And so getting into verse 6, God begins to describe, and it's awesome, these women and these seductress and how they operate. So listen to this, guys, starting in verse 6. For at the window of my house, I looked through my casement and beheld among the simple ones, I discerned among the youths a young man void of understanding, passing through the streets near her corner, and he went the way to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night. When you're doing wrong, you don't want to be seen. And it's funny that we try to hide from God. And no matter what we do, bad, good, indifferent, he sees it all. But we see the woman picking out her weak opponents, who she can ensnare. And she's looking, and she goes after the young man, void of understanding. We just got done talking about that. When I was youthful, I also went after the world. And it was empty, I found out. Later in life, treading that treadmill of going nowhere fast. These people, it's interesting that this person is picking out the weak out of the flock. The one without understanding, the youth.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it says, the simple ones, the ones that are simple, they don't have wisdom. they took the wrong idea. They took the wrong track, because wisdom makes the simple wise, right? Like, you can turn a simple man into a wise man by the words of the law. The Bible is real clear on that. Psalm 119 is just an amazing chapter that one day we'll have to just like go through and read through. It's very long. It's a long chapter.
There's no mistaking how God feels about his law in Psalms 119. There's no mistake. It's interesting that it's done in the dark and in with no light, and they're trying to hide it. They know, she knows, the seductress knows, whether she or he, because men are just as worse, they do it in the dark. And only the foolish man would think God can't see this.
And just as this applies to every nature of life, the person that decides to be simple and go against wisdom, this applies to all aspects of all sin. Somebody in the chat, they were talking about, they remember how easily they got flattered and it was disgusting to them, and I get that, that's how I feel about it. I'm like, because when the Bible talks about the harlot, it talks about you've gone out being a harlot, a prostitute. You've gone out, and because it gives these representations all throughout the Bible as Israel being a harlot and a prostitute, because they got enticed by another lifestyle. They got enticed by the Babylonian lifestyle. They got enticed by the Baal lifestyle, because they saw this stuff that looked just so flashy. And we're the same, like we've been the same in our lives. And thank goodness for Yeshua, man. I really think about that a lot. Thank goodness for that, because I was enticed. I would be one of the ones. I would be one of the ones in Israel that went after Balaam, basically, So,
well, our society, no matter what television you turn on, you phone to YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, social media platforms, there's no escaping it unless you are astute to it first and take every precaution you possibly can. But we live in a time where sexual promiscuity is promoted by government, even by churches. You look at the divorce rate and what causes divorce. Adultery is one of the main ones. We've got a church that's not teaching the wisdom that is set down and laid out in our scriptures, because the foundation of it all for each and every one of us, and we don't have an excuse when we stand before Jesus, is, did you follow my law? Because if you had, you would have not tripped up, if you would have placed that first in your heart. And that's what it sounds like to me. But he has absolutely given us the details of how this works in the dark, and picking their targets, their weak targets, the ones that don't have the understanding yet. And you have stressed many times reading Proverbs to your children, and reading many, many times, because you found the value of that protection. And many of you guys have as well.
And I feel like it's so hard to even impart to, just speaking on the children aspect of it, it's like, I want to impart this to my children as much as I can. And I can tell them, I can say the world is trying to entice you, is trying to draw you this way. And I do tell them all the time. I'm like, this is what this is doing. This is trying to draw you towards that, make it look flashy. And it's like, no matter how much you warn somebody, it's almost never enough. And sometimes you got to think about it. It's like, this is describing it in a way that you can see it and understand it. It would be nice to even show your children, what this flashy world does to you and what it actually does. They don't realize that the people in Hollywood are actually mind-controlled slaves. They really are, and I'm not kidding you, man. I'm not kidding you. I've talked to one of them before, for sure, on the phone a few times. Others, I'm not so sure. People call all the time, claiming to be Illuminati, claiming to be a military general, claiming all these things. People claim, but one of them I actually got to verify for sure that it was an actor, right? And I've also heard the testimony of many, many actors. They're mind controlled. They're preyed upon. They are, they've got fancy things, but man, at what cost, right? At what cost? And then you have people who, back when I was younger, drugs were the things that were like, really pushed, drugs and fun, sex, all the things, and then you get to it looks fun. My flesh wants to do it. It's just drawing me, but they don't see the other end of that. They don't see what actually happens eventually, right? It's like a rat going to a trap full of cheese. The rat may get away with it a couple times, And he may not, but that cheese is drawing him. He sees that cheese and he's like, that's cheese. I eat cheese. I like cheese. Just like our flesh is like, man, you see that? I like that. I like being comfortable. I like laying back, chilling, not worrying about a thing. I like all of that, and there it is. But they don't see that metal hammer that's getting ready to smash their guts out, like literally, like smashing them and killing them instantly. They don't see it, but it's like, how do you warn people about this in a way that they can see it? And I think Solomon tried really hard in here to warn, like, how this is how you see it. This is how you have to see it. He's trying so hard to warn. And I think, man, how much more creative can we get to warn these kids about this stuff? Because they're going to see it as enticing, just like I did. My own children are going to see it as enticing. You can't get away from it, even though we live in the country. You can't get away from it. You go into town, you see it. They have any kind of friends or contact with the outside world, they see it. It's enticing them. Just the more we can figure out a way to help them understand the trap, maybe show people that have gone through the trap and gotten hurt. That's one reason I think that we like to expose so much stuff on the Midnight Ride and other shows, is because it's like you want to show them, like, here's the back end, like, let's look at the back end of this stuff. So that, I don't know, it's a passion of mine for sure.
Well, you're absolutely right. You can talk until you're blue in the face, but until the other person is ready to accept it, they're going to. Who knows what people choose in their lives? But we are called to present the gospel, present the truth every time, whether it hurts, whether it don't. We're called to. But you're right. It's ultimately up to the person listening and taking the information in and then putting it in their heart and then acting on it. And only God knows when somebody comes to the end of themselves and they begin to listen to him. But you said something, I would have titled this until you said it, Enticing Tactics. That's what Solomon is writing today. The enticing tactics of these people, male or female, and how they employ their tactics and what to do about them. That enticing tactics, that would have been a good title for today.
And I'd like to hear what people think in the chat too. But please. I think this chapter would be a good one to actually air to people that maybe don't have the subscription network, just so that they can kind of hear what we're having to say. You guys in the chat, see if you're okay with that. You guys are the ones that make this possible. So if we got thumbs up from everybody, we're going to do it.
All right. Starting in verse 10, where we left off here, we highlight that so folks can see it. And behold, there met him a woman, make sure, a woman with the attire of a harlot and subtle of heart. She is loud and stubborn. Her feet abide not in her house. Now she is without, now in the streets, and lieth in wait at every corner. Doesn't call her a prostitute, just a woman in a harlot's garb. So that's interesting.
Yeah, she just desires to entice people and bring them in so that she can corrupt them. She's not worrying about the getting paid part of it. She's trying to get people enticed in. It reminds me of the whore of Babylon. Remember when it says that all nations drink of the cup of the abominations of Babylon? Like, they just an enticing woman sitting on the beast with a cup of abominations. She says she enticed the entire world through her harlotries and such.
Well, let's reread it with that intent.
Yes.
On that intent.
Read it.
So 10, and behold, there met him a woman with the attire of a harlot, of an harlot, in the subtle of heart. She is loud and stubborn, and her feet abide not in her house. Now is she without, now in the streets, and lieth in wait at every corner. When you talk about the harlot in Revelation, she's enticing every nation. Every nation.
And when I hear this too, in that aspect, I think of internationalists, people who they move around through country to country to country, moving the hands of history, moving the hands of government. They're not in their own house. They're out on every corner. They're on every corner. They're enticing you from every TV. They're enticing you from every radio. This is what I picture when we read it in that context. That's a good, it's interesting.
Well, when you look, and I did, like I talked about the divorce rate, and all these questions are popping up as I'm reading it this week. She dresses like a harlot, but is not a harlot. So, in our society, we've talked about streaming, we talked about platforms, and them just putting it up there. So, God is telling us this woman does not care. She is going after it, and she will use any tool to entrap you, or he. Doesn't matter what kind of sexual immorality this is. If a predator is out there, male or female, it doesn't matter to them. They will do whatever it takes to entrap somebody and destroy them. And we've seen it many times in society go down that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it seems like to me with the harlot in Revelation, just to destroy. But the tactics used is tantalizing, flesh tickling. So getting in further into this.
Well, just for a second too, we have to mention the Balaam Balak episode.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
This was a way of enticing Israel to curse themselves, right? They couldn't curse them. And if you guys haven't read that story, I definitely suggest it. But it talks about the whole idea that the prophet went to curse the children of Israel, couldn't do it. Then he suggested to the king that this is what we're going to do. We are going to, or this is what you can do. You can entice them with prostitutes. You can entice them with meat sacrificed to idols. You can entice them with all of these things. And eventually they're going to curse themselves with it. Push it on them. This is one of the reasons in Israel that God told them, if you have people that do these things, put them out of the camp, stone them. Get rid of them. Or the rebellious child, stone the rebellious child. You have somebody that's doing witchcraft, stone that person that does witchcraft, because their job is to entice. So if an enticer is allowed to entice, then it corrupts the entire camp. And that's what the entire world is corrupted right now because of the enticer being allowed to entice. And it is everywhere. It's not just in America. It's in every nation of the world. The enticer is unleashed on the entire world, on cursing all of us.
I totally agree. And it's only going to get worse. And here comes the crux of it, starting in verse 13, guys. Says this: so she caught him and kissed him, and with an impudent face said unto him, I have peace offerings with me. This day have I paid my vows. Therefore came I forth to meet thee diligently, to seek thy face, and to have found thee. It's crazy. I have decked my bed with coverings of tapestry, with the carved works, with fine linen of Egypt. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloe, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until the morning. Let us solace ourselves with loves. The entrapment is here.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly, you're locked in, no getting out once you go down that road. It just seems that way to me.
Well, yeah, and it's got all of the temptations, right? It's got, oh man, look at this beautiful place. I've come here in secret. You've got tapestries from, I think it said carved works, linen of Egypt, tapestries, myrrhs, aloes, cinnamon. It's just like, wow, this place is like a bedroom garden, right? This is just beautiful. Like everything here is just enticing. And I've got this seductive woman right there, right? It just makes it to where it's like at that point, right? Like you said, at that point, how can you say no? And you've gone that far to allow yourself to be enticed as well. And it's just talking the depths that the enticement is. And the ultimately the saddest thing about all this, John, is like we don't really have a choice in the seduction. We do have a certain choice of how much we can allow in our house. And allow in our house, but like we don't have. But this is what our children and all the people that we know are being faced with right here. They're being faced with all of this. Like, and if you're not a man, it's really hard to even understand this. But I'm sure as a female, there's ways you can relate this as well. But as a man, like I remember when I was younger, actually, and I'm just going to tell this story. I'm not going to be graphic or anything like that, but. There was this girl, and like I wanted to say no, I wanted to be done with it. I'm like, no, whatever. She invited me over, and I go up to her room, and like, she lives in this really fancy house, got a pool out back, The bedroom's done. So you could smell like just everything. And it's almost like you see almost like this scenario, like I can see it in my head. And I'm sure that every man out there has dealt with this scenario where you were not interested in actually doing that because, you didn't want to do it. I was a young man. I knew I shouldn't be doing it. And this is actually my first time ever doing it. I knew I shouldn't be doing it, but this was presented before me. And it's how can you say no to that? Like, it's like, this is like the perfect scenario, and that's exactly how sin does with people. It entices them so much. It's like, oh, we've got the perfect place for you to come and do your drugs. We've got the perfect place for you to come and have hedonistic affairs. We've got the perfect place for you to spend your money here and waste your money. All of these things that are just meant to make that perfect scenario for you to be able to do it. And not only do it, but to do it in secret. The world's designed for you to be able to do things that you shouldn't be doing in secret, just like this whore's room was designed for you to be able to come in secret and enjoy the finest night of your life. Let's put it that way. I don't know.
No, it's perfect.
That pretty good.
That's a perfect example, because the sexual immoral folks out there pushing this, propping it up, promoting it on everything we see, knows exactly the tantalizing tricks to tickle somebody's flesh. They know the buttons to push, and they continually push them. And when you got a predator out there, they know the weak spots. They're looking in the crowds just like a lion does for the weakest of the bunch. And once they pick them out, then they start throwing those flowers on the bed. They know exactly what to do for those situations to pull that person in. And once they have them in, that's the trap. That's it. It's over. But it is an ensnaring trap, and God is laying it out here. So you could place whatever sexual immorality on this and just flesh it out to that category, whether it's adultery, whether it's bestiality, whether it's pornography, whatever sexual immorality. They know, whoever they are pushing those buttons knows what buttons to push to tantalize that flesh, that person that's not walking in the ways just yet, not fully understanding life and the absolute pounding you're going to get if you make the wrong choices. God's trying to save us from that, it looks like.
Yeah, man, because the forces that are against us have they know mankind really well. They know every little thing that trips him up. They know every little thing he likes, every little thing his flesh desires, her flesh desires. They know it all, and they use it in such a way. It's so dangerous, man. And like, it's so dangerous that it's crazy how dangerous it is, and how unknowingly people play the harlot without even knowing it. Like, now, without even ever knowing that they're doing that, just because if they choose to ignore wisdom and not hold the hand of wisdom. Remember in chapter, I believe it was 1, where it talks about wisdom being a woman crying out in the street, ready to hold the hand of anybody that wants to grab hold, making the simple wise, but yet nobody wanted anything to do with it. And that's the difference. It's so, we can look at this and we can say, we really enjoy what this is saying. Whereas a fool, and I'm not trying to be a mean when I'm saying a fool, this is the full definition of fool in Proverbs, doesn't care about that part of it, wants to do what they feel is right. That's where this difference lies. Like, some people don't want to hear this. This is why one reason we did this on the website, because some people don't want to hear this part of the thing. They just want to hear the stuff about, oh, I want to understand mysteries. I want to understand that. But really, what the problem is, they will never understand real mysteries. They'll never even understand what we're saying fully without wisdom. And this is an important thing to seek. And only some people have eyes to see this stuff. Unfortunately, we don't want to cast our pearls before swine. So that's why I've been reluctant to put this out to the masses, because this is there would be casting your pearls before swine, because this is deep stuff. That's not just deep because we're smart, nothing like that. It's deep because you have to want holiness and desire it to even take this stuff seriously. This
is the stuff that makes us peculiar, guys, right here. So 19 and 21, and these two make sense to me, and maybe you can add, I know you will, but 19 and 21 says this, for the good man is not at home. That means her husband's not at home. He is gone on a long journey. He hath taken a bag of money with him and will come home at the day appointed. With her much fair speech, she caused him to yield. With the flattering of her lips, she forced him. And so this woman is not a prostitute at all. So she's an adulterous woman, and now this young man's an adulterous man. And there's all kinds of laws at the front of the book about marrying in adultery and causing other people to adultery. You guys have talked about soul ties many times in your research, but right here, it just seems like she's not a prostitute. This is an adulterous woman who is absolutely flat out wanting to take somebody down.
Yeah.
Literally, figuratively.
She's like making sure, like, for you, that it's like that much more enticing, because not only is she not a prostitute, you don't have to pay her money, but you don't have to commit to her because she's married and her husband's out of town, and he's definitely not going to be back anytime soon. He's going to be, you don't have to worry about any of those aspects. It's like, we got it all covered. Not that a normal man who has wisdom, a man who has wisdom would find that enticing at all. That would be scary to me. A woman who tells me that, like, look, my husband's out of town. Like, I'd be like, okay, you're a married woman. And
what's wrong with you, lady?
I would run. I would physically run. Just like, I'm serious. I would physically run. There's no, I would know exactly what that's all about. Listen, I've encountered women that it's talking about here, ones that actually even go into the verse you read there last, that force you to do it. Basically, if you don't have sex with me, if you don't do this, like, I'm going to I can get real nasty. Just trust me. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm talking like, girls that I liked, and it's like, I didn't want to have sex with them, but this is what they would say, forcing it upon. So like, and this is a married woman doing that. So you almost have to run. Remember that there's a story in the Bible, I believe it was with Joseph and Potiphar's wife, where Potiphar's wife was trying to do the same thing. She's like, let's go, this and that. Powerful woman trying to come forward and entice Joseph to doing that. He literally ran, like, he physically ran out of the house and was imprisoned after that. But that's what we're talking about here. This is crazy, man. This is a scary scenario that no man that's wise wants to deal with. It's something that they want to run from.
And for the ladies out there, this is just as much about you guys and a man doing the same thing this adulterous woman is doing, yet the tactics will probably be different and more of a predator. However, this goes both ways, and this goes with sexual immorality, period. But God's giving us a great example here of, and you're right, it does say, lips, she forced him. Like, that's nuts.
Once you've gotten yourself into that situation and you're there alone with that person, like you have, that's why you can't even be in those situations.
Well, Jesus,
go ahead.
No, Jesus tells us when he came, he says, even if you lust after her in your heart, you're committing adultery. That takes us up a whole nother level. That really defines what we read in the front of the book as concrete. It's all about the heart, guys. And that young man that was in the streets before, he shouldn't have been in the streets, period, running around so he could get picked out. But it boils down to the first 4 verses of this chapter. The only way we're going to avert these things is to listen to God in our lives. The trap goes so far as now he's forced. Let's see what happens to him next. So he goes, let me make sure. Yeah. It's 22-23. He goes after her straightway, just like you said, as an ox goeth to the slaughter. Look what God uses here, as a fool to the corrections of the stocks, till a dart strike through his liver, as a bird hasteneth to the snare, and knoweth not that it is for his life. The trap is set, he's stuck in it, and death is coming, is what I read.
Yeah, he gives an easy scenario for his son to understand. It's like, look, because he would see an ox go to slaughter on a daily basis, something that a lot of people don't even understand. I mean, they might understand what that means, but it's like, unless you see it happening, you know that they're rushing towards it because they don't even know what's waiting for them.
Well, I did.
Go ahead.
As I'm reading this week, I dug a little deeper, and what I've gathered from is once this trap is set, once the guy, and he's already in it, there's no getting out of it. You've got all kinds of mental instabilities coming. Like your conscience is now sheared. There's no taking that action back. There's none.
Yeah.
That's what I read here. That till the dark strike through his liver, as a bird hastened to the snare, and knoweth not that is in that it is for his life.
Yeah, has no idea, like just rushing towards it. Has no idea that he's getting ready to get it. Just like the mouse scenario that I talked about. Just like
Exactly.
a mouse has no idea that it's getting ready to get its head smashed. It's just getting ready to go for the trap. That's how simple they are. That's why what I said just a minute ago kind of rings even, you think about it even more. It's like, unless you're actually chasing wisdom, none of this even is going to make sense. What we're saying here isn't even going to make sense, because you don't even know that you're rushing toward death. This only makes sense to those who really truly want to go after wisdom. This is the only way it makes sense, man. It's amazing.
So here we go in verse 24. It says this: hearken unto me now, therefore, O ye children, and attend to the words of my mouth. Let not thine heart decline to her ways. Go not astray in her paths. For she has cast down many wounded. Yea, many strong men have been slain by her. Her house is the way to hell. He said that before, going down to the chambers of death. This is what God says about this act, these types of acts. House of hell.
Yeah.
Wow. So the
house of Sheol, the underworld.
The consequences of sin are both in this life and absolutely after this life. So there's two consequences that I always thought, you're going to have to deal with the whatever it is, divorce, the money, the sharing the kids, the dividing up of things. And that's another thing in the United States. There's been laws enacted in the 80s under Clinton's era to make divorce so much easier in the United States. So the sexual promiscuity is elevated, but there's so much death and destruction surrounded by these acts. There's also the secondary part of it. That means if there's no repentance and you stop breathing, there's a second consequence, and it's called hell, which is far worse in my book.
Yeah, and in the whole context of just choosing the harlot over choosing wisdom. So that we're talking about, wisdom versus foolishness. In that aspect alone, like it's just you're choosing death, and there's no way to even know it. And we're talking, in aspects of like affairs and going after women and doing different things like that. This applies, man. Like most of these people that are fools, like don't even know the way they're going. They have no idea. And you're right. It talks about, you just said this, but just to kind of emphasize, basically she is a staircase to hell, right? Rather than the stairway to heaven, right? She's a staircase straight into hell. She's cast down many, it says many wounded, many strong men. And we're talking when this word strong here means, and it means mighty and numerous, strong and mighty men that she's taken down to hell, taken down with her into these paths. That right there, to me, tells me that it's like, this is not just a simple warning. Many strong men, many men have led their way down there. We're not talking about 1 in 10. We're talking about the majority, because the way is narrow and few find it. And so the majority of men are pushed down towards this foolishness right now in America, especially in other parts of the world. But, when things get rough, when things get to the point they are today, foolishness is the majority. So we have herds of men and women rushing to their slaughter in this day and age that we're living right now. And it is frightening to see. It's sad to see. I know that we've tried to warn people. You guys have tried to warn people. All you listening, we try to warn people. And it is one of the saddest things. I look at this, the scenario where it says ox to slaughter. I know when we put, I have sheep, right? And when we have to take sheep to slaughter, or we have to slaughter sheep, it always when I see it, it saddens me in a way. It's because I don't want to have to slaughter the sheep, but at the same time, I want to have, proper food. And it's one of those scenarios that you see the people that, thank you, son. Tell mommy thank you too. My son brought me coffee. That's nice. So you don't want to see that happen, but when you think of it in human context, it's even more sad because they're rushing towards the slaughter. They are. You see it, and you see them all doing it. People you love sometimes rushing towards the slaughter, going straight down to the chambers of death because they chose foolishness. And that it's not just them, that a bunch of people have fallen for it. A bunch of people have went for it. And now you've seen it happen. And that's one of the saddest things I feel like as a human being on this earth for me right now. I used to think death was the worst thing, like I hate, sometimes I was like, man, why are we even living if we know we got to deal with like death constantly, always death and all these things. But now the worst scenario is of people rushing to foolishness, rushing to it, knowing that it leads to an eternal death, and doesn't just lead to regular death, it leads to eternal death. Because if you choose foolishness, you have not chosen, you haven't chosen God at that point. If you see what I'm saying.
That's exactly. So the list, he's calling, as he always does, he's calling us to listen to him in these warnings. And in chapter 7, as we've gone through it this week and today, I've noticed the examples he throws up there. And he gives very much details on how these people operate, how they think. And again, with the sexual immorality part, each of these categories, whatever it is, as morbid as it is, they have their tactics. And God is telling us we have to be just like you, John, when you're training. You try to train when you're grappling with somebody. You try to train with as many people as possible so that you have an understanding. Not everybody's the same. Everybody has a different tact schemes in that arena. And so do these predators. They have their tactics, and then they can pick out those who have little understanding, and they're very good at this. God's sitting there telling us they're this good. It says here where you just read they go to the slaughter. He goeth after her straightway. In our society, sexualization of people has been normalized. Like everybody, you're right, there's more fools out there than there are prudent people walking with Jesus. So that makes it that much more important for us walking in the way to shore up our borders, to keep our eyes forward and up, and avoid these things by doing what he's asked us to do. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, man. Some people seem to magnetize towards it, and put themselves in the situations over and over and over again. And this is a great thing to even, just like you said, like even when it just if you're just talking sexual immorality and the idea behind that and the way that people entice through that, it's really good to apply that to how people treat you or your family. Like, what are they doing? Are they enticing? Are they flattering? Are they maneuvering themselves in a way to where it's going to be hard to say no? The mafia used to put it, at least in that movie, an offer you can't refuse type thing, right? And wow, yeah, that's the Proverbs chapter 7 is probably so far out of all the chapters we've done, kind of sums up a lot. It really sums up a lot in that one chapter.
Well, he's lighting up the warnings to each of us, and he's pinpointing out the youthful, and also the ones that don't have understanding. And according to what I've read, the only place we can get that understanding is in his word. And when I read the first 4 verses, and I'm going to repeat it because it's worth repeating, this is the only way we can avoid these in the flesh. He's laying out here the groundwork. If we're following his word, you're definitely going to keep your eyes upwards, and you're going to stay on the straight and narrow path. As soon as you take your eyes off of his word and hiding it in your heart, this woman has an open door. And we can't allow open doors, guys. We've dealt with open doors all our lives. I'm tired of open doors. I'm shutting them. And so is John. and we're asking you guys to do the same. This would not go well on YouTube. this would not go well on YouTube.
Well, I mean, it probably wouldn't go well on YouTube. Unfortunately, I mean, really, unfortunately, it's so unfortunate because we have a lot of listeners on YouTube. I mean, we have 200,000 subscribers. If I could believe that 200,000 of those people actually cared about wisdom, I would definitely rejoice. But even if there's only 10, I would be satisfied with only 10 people that truly rejoice in wisdom and truly want the Father to reign in their lives. Those 10 people, 12 people, remember Jesus only had 12. He had 12 people that truly understood what was going on there. He had 12 people that really stood by his side. And so even if we only have 12, even if we only have 5 or 3 or whatever, just the fact that there are that many people that are starting to see it and maneuver in a way that maybe they can help other people understand it, or maneuver in a way that they can be a light in a dark world, like emphasize the light. And so praise God, man. Praise God.
You did put it to the chat room. You guys are going to make the decision on this one, whether you want this to go up publicly or you just want to keep it within the family here on the network. So I think that's what you said. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, John.
No, I think everybody on the chat too, when I did it, gave the thumbs up. So we could see how this would do. You can put it on there and we'll see. Hopefully at least wisdom's there crying out in the street, right? It's crying out in the street, the hands up. We'll see who gathers the hand, who goes after it and looks at it and sees it and grabs hold of it. You never know. I guess one episode could grab hold of somebody. Maybe there's something there for that time period that needs to be said on that video, and it needs to be said in front of people that maybe weren't seeking it out to begin with. I don't know. Who knows?
Well,
we'll see.
We'll do it. How's that? Well, that comes to the end of chapter 7, and I'm looking forward to next week, chapter 8, and continuing this on. This right here was the accumulation of the last 3 chapters, and God in this one gives us a lot more detail in the seduction. And I like how you put it, the traps, the seductive traps that they use, and you can adjust it to whatever sexual immorality subgroup you have, and then pinpoint those predators and look for those traps, look for those signs and symptoms of them being trying to entice you or those of your family members. God lays it out here in the first 4 verses. The only way to avoid this is to gain wisdom, gain understanding of what he wants you to do. Like John said, Psalms 119, he tells us his law is perfect, and that's what keeps us safe. That's what's kept me safe for the last 12, 13 years of walking this out. It's the only thing that's kept me safe. And if I take my focus off of it, I'm definitely going to be entrapped and definitely going to have 2 consequences if repentance is not there. But the one is absolutely hammered home in this one to where your life is destroyed completely, utterly. And in the last chapter, it says it takes your honor. Not only it takes your honor and your character away from you, it defames you. I don't know how many ways God can tell us this is bad. And then Jesus comes along and says, if you do it in your heart, and what's he point out in Proverbs? It's all about our heart, every bit about what we allow in our hearts. So it's a good warning, and it gives us some good insight, I think.
I think so too. And I know the next chapter we're going to go through is speaking of the opposite of this harlot woman. It's going to be speaking of the lady of wisdom. And it's going to be speaking about all the things that apply to that. And it's really a good balance to this one. So, because it just shows us the opposites, right? It shows us kind of what we described here in chapter 7 is not only is it representing and telling us about the real person of the harlot, but it's also telling us about the opposite of wisdom, foolishness, that being the harlot as well. And so the next chapter kind of goes into really a lot about the lady of wisdom that it talks about, how he's giving wisdom a female persona, I guess, if you will, and the opposite of the female persona of the harlot. So it talks about that. I'm excited to go into chapter 8. I kind of wish we would have been able to do both of these together, but they're long, right? So we would have been here for a long, long time. But next time,
We
stay
are.
tuned for that because it's going to be good.
We